you have something to say off what I say, you can just follow me. I'll follow you for the designers.
All right.
Oh, good.
All right, everybody, welcome to the live stream. First, I want to let you know that this video is brought to you by Miniature Market, where they have thousands of board games at discounted prices at miniaturemarket.com. All right, well, thank you, everybody, for joining to the live Q&A. We've got a big treat for you tonight. As you know, Jamey Stegmaier from Stegmaier Games is going to join us to talk about the new announcement of the upcoming expansion to Scythe. But we've got a double treat for you because it's not just Jamey joining us. We also have co-designer Ryan Lopez in the house. How you guys doing?
We're doing great.
Fantastic. First of all, Jamey, we still have not met in person. I go to all the conventions, and I always miss you. I know you don't go to a whole lot of conventions, but I tend to miss you on the very small ones that you have gone. One thing I've always admired of you is not only your brilliance of design and publishing, because being able to do both of those things really well is not something that happens quite often. But also your ability and your want to be able to share knowledge with the industry, and I think that's just an amazing thing. The way you respond to forums, the way that you just help everybody out every way you can. I've always admired that about this. So thank you so much for joining the channel.
Oh, my pleasure. It's awesome to be here, Dan.
Yeah. So I did have a couple of questions right off the bat from some early people that had submitted one. One of them was, actually, before we get into the questions, Jamey, some of the people here know what we're talking about, but maybe because some of them are just joining and don't know what we're talking about, why don't you go ahead and just give the sort of quick and dirty explanation of what this expansion is. You did a big announcement on New Year's Day, and then the next day I did a follow-up video sort of commenting on it and my thoughts and breaking it down into detail, but maybe not everybody here knows exactly what's there. So why don't you just give us a brief overview before we jump into the questions? Sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because some people may not know what my company is or who I am. I'm Jamey. I run Stegmaier Games. That's pretty easy to find on the internet. It might be a little harder for you guys to know who Ryan is. Ryan is someone who had played Scythe and designed a fan expansion to Scythe called Letters of the Past.
Lessons.
Lessons from the Past, yeah. And he posted it on Board Game Geek about a year ago. And so Ryan is my co-designer for the final version of that expansion, the Rise of Fenris. So I guess I wanted to introduce Ryan to everybody because you guys probably have not seen Ryan's face on these videos before.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm new to this whole world. I'm somebody who's tinkered around with things over the years, been playing games since about 2005 or so, 2005, 2006 in earnest, and just kind of stumbled into some good fortune recently. And Jamey was kind enough to invite me in. It was fantastic. It's been a great experience.
Yeah, I saw that Ryan had posted this expansion on Board Game Geek, and I had been hearing from people that they liked it. They liked his ideas and what he had put out there, and that people just in general wanted a campaign expansion. So Ryan and I have been working together for about 11 months on the Rise of Fenris, which is a campaign expansion to Scythe, and also optionally a modular expansion. So if you don't want to play through it game by game, you just want to jump in and mix and match a bunch of stuff, you can do that as well.
That's fantastic. So that's a really cool story, actually. That hey, you can have passion for a game. You can just be a normal game player. You can put something out there, and people like publishers like you, they look for that stuff. And hey, it helps you too. It helps grow the grassroots, and it helps you make awesome things like this. That's a really cool story. I did not know that.
Yeah.
So, Jamey, anything else you want to introduce the expansion just in general for those that might not know all of the ins and outs yet, that just were like, hey, what, there's an expansion? Let me join this live Q&A.
Sure. I'll go into the general mechanisms and components in a second, but Ryan, why don't you tell them where it fits into the storyline, the story part of it?
Sure, yeah. So basically the standard game of Scythe takes place just after the Great War, which is World War I, and it's slightly off of our actual historical timeline because in Jakob's 1920-plus universe, the Great War took place, I want to say 1910 to 1916, and then Scythe itself takes place somewhere, we've decided, in the realm of about 1920. A few years later, recovery's been going on, and that's where, when you're playing a game of Scythe, that's kind of where it takes place. And when I first was sort of wrapping my head around the game, a year ago or longer, one of the things I always thought was that it was more of a nation-building game than it was a war game or a farming game. And when people had talked about things like, understanding on the forums and things about understanding the star system, like putting these stars up there, I always tried to explain it whenever I got in those conversations as, well, there's sort of a military recovery, and there's an economic recovery, and there's a sort of an infrastructure recovery, and those different 10 achievements on the Triumph track represent those things, and you do enough of those, and you've moved past the recovery stage into something kind of the next era of history or whatever. And so basically with the Rise of Fenris, we are picking up from that point and moving forward. The nations have more or less recovered, and now we're moving on to the in the story arc that takes place from about 1920-21 to about 1924, and it just tells the story after a game of Scythe, and tells us what comes next, basically, because a lot of players have wanted to know more about the lore, and so that's what we did. We just decided to flesh that out, and I was fortunate enough to get some notes from Jakob about what his world was and how he envisioned it, and from that kind of built a story up, and then Jamey and I kind of built the games out of the story, and yeah, I think it's pretty exciting. If people want to know just more about the world, then this is where they're gonna get that information. And his world is called 1920 plus, and we're into the 1920s now, basically with this story arc. So it's pretty exciting. It basically picks up right after a normal game of Scythe might take place and goes forward from there.
And a part of that, the expansions that we already have, the Invaders from Afar and the Wind Gambit, they are mechanically compatible with the expansion, and also in terms of the story, they kind of fit in. Like you play a normal game of Scythe in terms of the story, and then these invaders come in from afar. That's Invaders from Afar. Then the Wind Gambit kind of happens between Invaders and the Rise of Fenris. But mechanically, there are some reasons that we don't actually bring the airships in optionally until, I think, what is it, game 3 or 4?
Yeah, something like that. I think game 4 they become available.
Right, they become available. They're not necessary at all. Like if you only have Scythe, you can just jump right to the Rise of Fenris if you want. But if you have those expansions, then you kind of tell the full story of Scythe.
But if you have the Wind Gambit and you open the campaign book up and you say, wait, it says don't use the Wind Gambit, what's going on? That's just for a couple of games, and then
right.
everything clears up after that.
Right. Now, we haven't gone into really deep into what the mechanisms of the game are yet. We've kind of just released the general scope of the components, which are there's a lot of cardboard tokens. There's a bunch of punch boards in the game that you'll punch out as you play each campaign. So you're kind of unlocking new components as you go. There are also tuck boxes that have hidden components in them that you'll unlock as you play. In total, we haven't revealed what exactly these are, but there are 62 wooden tokens. There are 13 miniatures. There's a big campaign book. And as you play, you can play through the games, like I said, in the campaign way, but it's also completely resettable and replayable. It's not a legacy game. There's no elements of permanency in this game. So you can reset it whenever and however often you want.
Yeah, one of the cool things that I think about this is that resettable and replayable aspect, but also that for some people out there that might not like campaign style games, that you could separate them out into those 11 different modules and play them as that caters to your gamer's taste, right?
Right.
Yeah, you have the option if you want to just dive in and say, I'm not really a campaign gamer, or I don't know if I can get people together for 8 games. I suppose you could just read through the story for the fun of it, and you could just dive right into the components and start opening stuff up and working them in. And they're largely interchangeable. Some players will probably find as they go that some of the modules work better in conjunction with each other than others, or they may find some that really play well to their group's style, but not necessarily to another group's style or something like that. But that was, I think, part of what we wanted to cover was different play styles, different preferences, and some of these modules are very significant, game-changing type modules, and some of them are relatively minor, just, I don't want to give anything away, but relatively minor modules that like you could easily fold into every game and just make some very minor tweaks to it. And I think that pretty much any gamer will be able to find something they like in this, that if they don't use it every game, they would at least keep in a regular rotation, and maybe hopefully several things.
Yeah, a lot of the preparation that went into this expansion, and even just throughout the process, was Ryan and I reading comments from people online. Often people saying, "Hey, I love Scythe, but I wish it had a little bit more of this, or I wish it had a little less of this." And the modular expansion elements of the expansion let them address those needs. Just a general one is that if someone wants a little bit more combat in a game or a little less combat, those are options that they can get from those modular expansions. Whereas in the campaign, there are paths that you can choose. It's not straight up one episode then another. There are some splitting, some branching paths, and there are some times where players who are used to playing one way will be challenged to play another way in a certain game. So we're kind of pushing them in these different mechanical and thematic directions as they play through the campaign.
Now, is it possible, depending on your play style and what you do in these different episodes, that you might not unlock all of the tuck boxes or might not unlock all the things that come with it?
No, I don't think so. Well, no, you should unlock everything throughout the course of the campaign. It's not, there are some branching paths, but we sort of try to double back and catch things. There's maybe one or two modules that come out in the end, maybe, that you wouldn't necessarily see without replaying, but not much. Everything should come out.
Yeah, we kind of took that approach. I think there were probably times during the design process where maybe something wasn't in there, but we realized later on that people probably want to see everything during the campaign. So it's more of an order of operations where you might start off unlocking this one thing in one campaign, and then later, and the other thing that you could have unlocked will be unlocked much later in the campaign instead of vice versa. I think that happens maybe 3 times. I think 3 different modules do that, or pairs of modules.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Let's go to some questions from the crowd that's here. If you're watching us online live right now, you can go ahead and at any time, just go ahead and put some questions in the comments there, and we'll try to get to those as soon as we can. We'll try to get as many as we can. One of them is, how soon before companies like the Broken Token will have what they need from this expansion to design the remaining inserts necessary for it all to fit in the legendary box together?
Yeah, so I actually emailed the Broken Token and a few of the other companies that make those beautiful inserts about a month ago, and told them the size of the components and the general scope of the components. So like they don't know how every cardboard token looks and things like that, but they mainly need to know what the miniatures look like and how big they are and how many wooden tokens are in the game. So they already have that information, and they're already building, I think they're already starting to design insert modules for them. So I think even, we're talking about a modular expansion, even those custom inserts will be modular. So if you already bought the Scythe Broken Token insert, you don't have to rebuy anything. You'll just buy the Fenris add-on. As far as I know, actually, our company approach to these third-party companies is that we love that they make cool stuff that supports our products, but we don't license to them. We don't make any money or royalties off them. We're just happy that they're making cool stuff for people who love our games. So I usually just toss some information out there for them to use. Sometimes I'll send an advanced copy of the game for them to use. But other than that, I'm not all that involved with the design process for what they do. Okay.
You got a question about some of the components. Someone had asked if, from the miniatures that are there, are they the sort of gray style miniatures that they will need or want to paint, or are they more of just like the colored, kind of like how the mechs are?
I think those are going to be faction colored the same. Well, I don't know. I guess I'm not involved in that. I shouldn't be answering this question. I'll let Jamey handle that. Sorry.
Well, it's a little hard to answer because we haven't revealed what those miniatures are. But I will say they are consistent with the other miniatures in the game.
Okay. Yeah, that kind of gives us a good idea. We have it's one of those things that's tough because you don't want to spoil things, and yeah, I get that. Someone wrote a sort of a funny question about sort of a crossover. They said, "Will there be a Scythe cloud port to send resources back to the Forever King?"
This is a reference to Charterstone, our
Yes,
game that just came out. And usually, actually, that's a fun question, because usually we put Easter eggs in our games that link to other games that we have. Like in Scythe, there's one of the factory cards has a St. Louis arch in it. My cats are in one of the encounter cards, just little things like that. But Scythe, Jakob wants Scythe to not reference other games because he wants it to be in his own universe. So there is no reference. I think there are references to Scythe in Charterstone, but there are no references to Charterstone in Scythe.
Okay, that makes sense. Someone wants to know are you planning on maybe collaborating with Jakob on any other non-Scythe projects?
Yeah, Jakob he's the artist and world builder of Scythe, and also a lot of other worlds. Some world, like if you check out his art online on his Facebook page or ArtStation, you can see that he's started to create a bunch of other worlds, including there's one with like werewolves, there's one with gnomes, there's one, he loves The Witcher, so he's done some like Witcher fan art. There's one that's being turned into a virtual reality, I think virtual reality video game. And so I guess the answer is I would love to work with him again. Currently, we don't have any plans of doing it. I'm kind of waiting for him to feel enough inspiration for one of these worlds to stay with it for a long time. Like in Scythe, there are hundreds of pieces of art in Scythe. And so I kind of need him to have that same motivation, that same passion for one of these other worlds. When that happens, though, I am excited to try to design a game in that world.
Yeah, I'd be really excited to see anything in a world that he creates, because it made my artwork of the year last year, and I just love that style, and I've been really tempted to buy that cool book that you can get that has the art in there.
Yeah.
We got some more questions about the size of the boxes. People want to know what's the size of the box? Is it maybe the same size as both expansions side by side?
It's currently it's literally the size of Invaders from Afar and the Wind Gambit side by side put together. I say currently because we need to actually finalize all the different components in the box, like the size of how they'll fit in the box. So it might end up being a little bit taller or something like that, but it'll be close in size to two expansion boxes put together. Okay.
Thanks for that. Some people want to know about the competitive nature of it. Someone says, is it even more sort of like, are there any semi-cooperative aspects to the design?
Why don't you field that one, Ryan?
Sure. There's semi-cooperative aspects, sort of, and there's sort of some semi-cooperative stuff in there, and there's also a cooperative module that Jamey's already revealed, and the cooperative module I think is really clever, and that was actually entirely Jamey's design. That part, he really just dropped that on me one day, and I was like, well, this is awesome, this is great. And I think it's going to go over really well. So for people looking for that cooperative experience, I was a little surprised actually at how many people had expressed interest in the cooperative experience out of Scythe. I didn't totally expect that. I know it's not a direction my head would have gone, but I really like what Jamey did with it, and I think that people are going to be pretty satisfied. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would even personally like to see like even like a team versus team thing where you've got certain things going on. I think that would be interesting. But what about when we're talking about the expansions? And obviously, we've talked about how it can be used with all the expansions, which is great. But a lot of people want to know how important is it to have the expansions with this? Obviously, you could play it with just the base game now or with the expansions. Is the experience going to be a lot better if you have the expansions, or will somebody who has the base game still be able to take full advantage, and are you sort of missing anything with this next expansion?
I would not say you are missing anything. I love the other expansions, and Invaders is cool because you have the extra factions to choose from and the extra player mats, and you can go up to 7 players. So that's nice, but everything you need is in that Scythe box, and everything you need for Fenris is in the Fenris box. So I wouldn't. It's almost hard for me to answer that because I have everything. Ryan, you have all the expansions, right? You played with everything.
Yeah, I've pretty well completed my set just about at this point. So
yeah,
I don't think you need it though. I think that I can't see any reason why you would. It would certainly, I suppose, potentially enhance the experience, but there's no particular reason that you would need. Like if somebody went out and said, you know what, I want that big expansion as my first expansion. I just bought Scythe, whatever, in May, and this expansion's coming out sometime in the summer. I want that to be my big first expansion. I think they would do fine with that. I don't think you'd really be missing anything. And the only real limitation is you wouldn't be able to play 7 players if that's important to you. I suppose you'd have some limited, you'd have 2 fewer player boards to choose from, and then if you wanted to use the airships, you would not be able to do that. But that's really the extent of the limitations. It's the same limitation you'd have on playing regular Scythe, and I think it is going to be just fine. Some people expressed concern on Facebook too, I guess, a while back about, I think it was Facebook, about the Wind Gambit being required or not, and it is certainly not required. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So some people are wondering, can you explain Fenris? Because the title. Why don't you go ahead and field that one?
Jamey,
why don't you take that one? I don't know what we're going to say.
Yeah, this is that's a good question that will dance around. The title, even just the title of the expansion, is meant to make you wonder what Fenris is, who that person is in the foreground of the box art. Jakob did a great job not giving anything away, but hinting at things to come in the box art. So we're not going to reveal that yet. Although I should say, since we've been dancing around a number of spoilers, at a certain point we will put the whole PDF of the rulebook online, probably sometime this summer, in early summer. And so anyone who doesn't care about spoilers can read whatever they want. We're not going to hide that kind of stuff from people who want to know. I'm sure people will want to know exactly what's in there, and they can find out if they want. But until then, we'll dance around some questions like that.
Yeah. So speaking of the summer, I know that I think it said Q. When is the release? I think it said Q3. Was it?
Yeah, we're on track right now for a Q3 release, which hopefully means August, which hopefully means Gen Con. I don't want to commit to that yet because it's still pretty early. We haven't even started production on the miniatures yet, but we will soon. So we're on track for that. Hopefully August, Gen Con.
Yeah, when I first saw that was the first thing I thought. I was like, oh, please, Gen Con, please, Gen Con.
Yeah.
There's a question about the boards. Will there be any new boards in this expansion?
Brian, have you seen how I've answered this one?
Why don't you go ahead? I have, but I don't want to misstep, so you go ahead.
So there are, this is something that I want to say because I know some people were hoping that there would be a new board or a new overlay on the board, and we did experiment with some stuff like that, but we couldn't get it to work in a smooth enough way. So there are lots of tiles in the game that might have different uses. Some might interact with the board, but there is no new board and there is no new elements to the map itself.
Okay. Now, about the campaigns, in my video that I put up earlier this week, I kind of touched on some of your forum responses to how, Scythe does have some built-in variability with it, and definitely some of the modules that come out will also have that. There's different paths you can take. But people are asking about how replayable is the campaign. Would you ever really want to play it again, or is it more like a Time Stories where once you've played it, you probably won't want to play it again?
I would say that probably depends on your group style, but there's no reason you couldn't play it again. That's where a legacy game or even a Time Stories type game, which has some pretty, I guess, meaningful spoiler type things in it. Like there's nothing like that in this. So if you played it with one group, really liked it, and wanted to replay it solo, or wanted to go replay it with a different group, there would be no particular reason you couldn't. You'd have a slight advantage. Anyone who'd played it once would have a slight advantage when certain games came up about certain episodes about, okay, how do I make the most of this episode? Because that's one of the things, at least for me, that was important, is to sort of stretch the way people think about the game and approach the game a little bit. Not too dramatically, but I just wanted to say, hey, let's think about our games just a little bit differently. So maybe sometimes your preferred strategy, your preferred opening tactics might not always be optimal in every game. So you really have to kind of pay attention to the flavor text and the introductory narrative, to the episode goals, to the special setup rules, and kind of go, okay, I think this is going to demand a slightly different approach than I'm used to. And in that sense, it might be really rewarding to replay because you might have played suboptimally the first time around and realized, oh shoot, I wasn't adapting quickly enough to some of these things, and that would give you a chance to go back and take another swing at it and see if you couldn't maybe play a little bit better. So you could certainly play it multiple times. You just would have a small advantage just because you would know what was important to go for. You'd have a little better sense of it.
Okay, so like, comparing and contrasting, say, something like Pandemic Legacy, which has lots of ups and lots of downs, huge peaks and valleys, and then obviously, we talked about how Charterstone was more of a stable thing, but there was definitely, as the things happened at the end of each game and different things happened, that yes, playing with the recharge pack with Charterstone was probably a lot easier to play again because the decisions were there were less peaks and valleys. There wasn't as many like crazy story things that really made the experience what it was. It was more about the mechanisms of the games. So would you say it's more in line of like the Charterstone, where because it's inherently obviously there's the world and the story and such, but there's those things are more about what you do with those mechanisms and how you play that versus having the big like shock and awe factor that you maybe will in like a story-driven game like Pandemic?
Yeah, in terms of replayability, certainly. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but I think if people do avoid the spoilers and they do hold off on opening some of those tuck boxes until the game tells them to, they'll have the first time they play, they will have those memorable moments of, wow, I can't believe that's the thing that we just unlocked, or I can't believe that's the thing that just happened.
There are going to be some pretty exciting, I think, story elements to it. Yeah. If you withhold the spoilers and just play through it once, but that, like you say, it'll be much more of a stable kind of mechanical thing on the second replay.
Right.
Okay. Now, people are asking about the time of the game. When you play in the campaign mode, let's just say, each of the different episodes, do you expect the time to play those episodes to be about the same as the base game, or do you think they'll be longer?
It varies. It varies. I would say what we aimed for, and I think we accomplished this, is that the longest an episode will play will generally be the length of a normal game of Scythe. I think maybe there's one or two that could go a little bit over, but for the most part, we tried to make them a little bit shorter. And my intention here, I think this has just happened organically. We didn't really talk about this until fairly recently. Was that maybe a group could play 2 games on a night, so then you're not committing to having to get together 8 times over a few months. You can get together 4 times and then play. So I think we're probably looking at maybe 2 games in a 3-hour span. But there are some games that can go pretty fast, faster than normal Scythe if you go after a certain way to end the game. Can you think of any exceptions to what I said, Ryan?
No, that sounds about right. I think most games, players, based on what I've seen online, some players have, varying average lengths for Scythe. But I think most of these games will come in at roughly your average length. But like Jamey said, some of them will definitely potentially be much shorter or somewhat shorter, especially if somebody sees what the end game trigger is and decides to push that. It's easier to do with a few of these scenarios than it would be in a standard game of Scythe. There are scenarios now where you could push that end game and probably knock out a game pretty quickly compared to normal.
Cool. So for people that are joining just now, obviously we've got Jamey Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games, but the other voice you were just hearing is Ryan Lopez, the co-designer of this new expansion coming up for Scythe. And speaking of Ryan and this sort of thing, people want to know, Jamey, in your experience, how often do fan-made expansions end up kind of coming to fruition and being published, sort of the story that we're hearing here tonight?
Well, it's hard for me to speak. If they're asking in general, I don't really know. I only have my experiences, and I'm still pretty new at this. So it did happen with the Wind Gambit, a similar story with the Wind Gambit, where a guy designed an expansion, play tested it a few times, and then I ended up working with him, a guy named Kai Stark. Similar thing happened with Ryan. I think that those are the only instances that have happened so far in terms of co-designed expansion. Actually, no, with Morton, the guy that I work with who designs the Automata, the solo systems, that started off as a fan thing too. So maybe it's just a trend within my company. I don't know. I'm sure that has happened to other companies too, but I don't know how often it happens.
Okay, fair enough. At the beginning of this broadcast, I talked about how much not only I, but pretty much everybody loves how open and sharing you are in the community about board gaming and helping people out and sharing. And one of the questions was, do you know how much time, like on a given day, do you actually spend answering questions online to sort of helping people out to help support them in your games and such?
Quite a few hours. I mean,
all of the time.
Yeah, and it's usually not just like a block of time. It's usually I have 2 monitors, and usually something social media related is open on one of those monitors at all time, unless I'm really going deep into a game design. Then I shut everything off and just focus on that game. But on any given day, probably a total cumulative amount of 4 to 5 hours of customer service, communication, social media. And fortunately, actually, when I answer that, I want to give a shout out to guys like Ryan, co-designers who have been chiming in with questions, and just fans and volunteers and supporters. A guy named Josh Ward has been all over the Charterstone Facebook page recently. Really, really appreciate what he's done. Just anyone who, like, a lot of people have chimed in to help out with that. So it's not just me, it's a lot of people who know my games pretty well and are willing to answer questions.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
Like, how do you even, spending that much time on that? I can imagine. I mean, that's not even like working on designing, developing games. So, like, how do you even find the time to do that? I'm assuming, obviously, it's in addition to that, but do you find yourself where you just set like one day aside that you're not doing what we just talked about, where you really need to just focus, and maybe it's a full day? Or, I mean, are you doing like 10 to 12 hours days between the communication and working on the games? Or?
Well, a general day for me is I get to the computer, like I work and live in the same place. So I get to the computer around 7:30 in the morning, and I work until around 11 at night, with taking breaks for like meals or maybe to play games with friends. So I know you guys have families and kids and whatnot. I don't have that, so I just have 2 cats to take care of, and they're fairly low maintenance. So I'm able to commit a lot of time to this.
Okay, well, I don't have any kids either, and so
you don't have kids. Okay.
I think we're cut from the same cloth, because I think I live and work in the same spot here too. So yeah, it's one of those things where I don't. Plus, when it's your passion, it doesn't ever feel like work. I mean, it's just you lose yourself in the times. But yeah, I totally get what you're saying, and I can commend you, because I know you and I have contacted each other, and the responsiveness of how fast I get emails back from you is like almost mind blowing. So, so now this was said as being the conclusion to the Scythe universe, and I guess I just want to make sure that we heard that very clearly, because we know you've got lots of projects up and coming. Is there any glimmer of hope that maybe someday down the line there might be something Scythe related, whether it's maybe not a new expansion, but maybe a different version, or maybe something they could upgrade to, or anything within Scythe that you would maybe even possibly think about doing?
Well, there are. So this is the final. I mean, I guess there's like the slimmest chance that something awesome will come about, and we'll say, okay, well, screw it, we'll just make a 4th expansion. That's definitely not the plan. And it's my fullest intention for this to be the last expansion for Scythe. However, there are 2 Scythe-related accessories that we're working on. I don't know for sure if we'll make them, but they're on a form on our website so we can gauge interest. One are metal versions of all the mechs, and one is a fully modular game board that we considered putting in this expansion, but we found for budgetary and time reasons and other restrictions that it just didn't make sense. Also thematic reasons why it didn't make sense for this expansion. So there are those 2 things. And there is the slim possibility of maybe a role-playing game in the Scythe world. I think that's a very slim chance. But some people have expressed interest in that, and we have some people who have proposed ideas for that to us.
So about those metal mechs, are you talking about like paint, like fully painted, you could just buy them from you and they're all set up, or?
They wouldn't be painted, they would be inked, so that they have, you've seen like an inked piece of metal versus just a glossy piece of metal. It kind of shows all the small details on the grooves. So they wouldn't be painted, they would have bases that are the colors of their corresponding faction, but the top half would be a very metallic looking metal color. It wouldn't be painted.
Okay.
Kind of intentionally. I thought that might be better than painted mechs.
Yeah, because I see a lot of people online asking about hey, you know, where'd you get your characters painted at? Have you ever even entertained the fact of possibly offering that? You know, I just got Heroes of Landair Sea in recently, another 4X game that we've been talking about, and they had pre-painted characters there, heroes. And I was just wondering, you must get this question often, but have you ever considered the possibility of offering the components, maybe working with somebody, whether it's a small house or whatever, coming up with that?
So I haven't considered doing it at scale for Scythe. Like my publisher Panda or my manufacturer Panda can do it. But I love seeing the creativity of people who do it themselves at home as a hobby. And there are some professionals that do it really beautifully. So some of them are linked on our website just because I think they do great work and I want to share them with people. But nothing official from Stegmaier, just similar to the broken token method. Just I like that other people are making cool stuff and painting our miniatures that way.
Well, coming from a person who cannot paint, that would love to have a full set. I'd love to put a bug in the ear maybe someday, because I would definitely fork over the cash to have that. So I got one more question about Scythe and then one final question for you. About the Scythe, the question is basically about the resources. So people want to know, they bought the premium resources and they've got them there. Will they need to buy more once they start unlocking tuck boxes, or are they still going to be fine just using what they've got?
Ryan, you can feel that one. You know that one.
They're fine.
Okay, cool. So Jamey, there's been a lot of people on here that have been asking about other projects that you may or may not want to just touch as little or as much as you want. So if you just like, you could just tell us about what you have upcoming. That people seem to be really interested about that. There were a ton of people asking questions about that. So.
Well, I really appreciate that people are excited about what we're making. That means a lot to me as a publisher and as a designer. I am currently designing 3 games that will, at least one of them will probably come out in early 2019, and then maybe another one in late 2019. And I'm also working more from the development side on, I think, 3 games that will be will most likely be published this year. From other designers that we've signed. I haven't talked about what the theme of the, well, actually, I've hinted at them in some of my game design videos, but the code names for those games are on our monthly e-newsletter. But most likely, yeah, we'll have some releases. We might have another game at Gen Con that releases, and then probably one at Essen, and then maybe another one around that time as well. Nothing in the front half of the year, though. Everything's kind of back-ended this year.
Okay.
Those code names are driving me insane, by the way, Jamey.
Was that right?
Those code names are driving me insane, by the way.
Well, you're on the inside now. I can just tell you what they are. Not on camera, but I can tell
you. I still can't figure it out. So there you go.
Yeah, I wonder how obvious those are. I remember one time, I think The Godfather from Eric Lang was his code name for that was Project Suitcase, and he felt like it was too obvious. So I wonder, speaking of code names, have you ever had a code name that in retrospect, once people have maybe figured it out, you went, oh man, that wasn't vague enough?
I've had a few people email me and say, yeah, I know what that game is, because they maybe seen me mention it on a YouTube video or something. And so I've been impressed by some people connecting the dots. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. All right, well, before we get going, I just wanted to let everybody know that this video was sponsored by Miniature Market, and they have a review corner, which I am a part of. They have audio, written, and video reviews on the review corner at miniaturemarket.com, who has thousands of board games at discounted prices. And you can go see all of my rules videos and many things that other great contributors do. The Miniature Market wanted to make sure that you guys knew about that. And so back to us. So guys, I can't thank you enough for joining tonight. I know I appreciated it, and the people online certainly. I was just asking you the questions that people were putting up there best I could. You guys did not get to see this, but there were a ton of people thanking you for all the hard work that you've done, and they're really excited about this expansion. So I just wanted to thank you guys so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here. And if anyone wants to continue this conversation, not necessarily right now, but anytime in the future, Ryan is very active in the Scythe Facebook group, as am I. So feel free to join us in that Facebook group. It's a very friendly, welcoming group, so feel free to ask any questions. and we'll do our best to answer them there. And
So is
Dan,
that
thank you so much for-
what's the easiest way to find that group? Is it searchable? Is it
if you search for like the Scythe, I think if you just search for Scythe on Facebook, the group will show up there.
Yeah, and so if you're watching this stream not live but later on, I will put the link of that group in the description of this video. So if you're watching after the fact, just go down there. You can get to that Facebook group. Is there any other way that we could get a hold of you guys, or is that Facebook group the best way, or for any other sort of just board game related things, what's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
I'm pretty active on the Facebook group and also on BGG, so I try to monitor those forums. I have now subscribed, I think, to most of the forums for the Fenris expansion, so I get those notifications, and I try to... I'm never going to be as responsive as Jamey, but I'll at least try to be as nice.
Speaking of being nice, I always thought that, like, if you and Rodney Smith had a nice off, I don't know who would win.
Oh, Rodney would win, for sure.
Until you get to the table, and then he takes your throat out, right? He's fun to play games. Well, thanks so much, guys, again, for joining. I know everyone really appreciated it, so thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dan.